Every love story begins with trust. But what happens when that trust becomes a weapon? When the person you open your heart to begins to slowly close the door on your sanity? For Angela Hayes, life was supposed to be perfect: success, love, and the promise of forever. But behind that promise was something else, something she couldn't see until it was too late. Because sometimes danger doesn't come crashing through your door. It walks in wearing a smile, whispers, "I love you," and makes you believe it. This isn't just a story about love gone wrong. It's about how one woman's search for happiness led her straight into the hands of something far more dangerous. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Angela Hayes was not born into a world of silk and success. She wove it herself. From a cramped apartment with a second-hand sewing machine, she built Elysian, a fashion brand that became synonymous with elegance and power. Stitch by stitch, sacrifice by sacrifice, she climbed to the peak of an industry that rarely makes room at the top. While her friends were celebrating anniversaries and her younger sisters were having children, Angela was closing deals, sketching designs under lamplight, and walking the red carpet at galas, always smiling for the cameras, always alone. At 44, she had achieved a level of success most people could only dream of. Her name was a brand. Her face was on magazine covers, but every night she would return to a sprawling, multi-million-dollar mansion that felt more like a museum than a home, its grand halls echoing with a profound and deafening silence. She told herself that success was enough, that the empire she built was the only partner she needed. But in the quiet moments, staring at her reflection in the dark windows of her empty dining room, her heart knew the truth. She was desperately, achingly lonely. That loneliness was a quiet hum that grew louder with each passing year. At family gatherings, she'd master the art of the polite smile while deflecting the inevitable questions. "When are you finally going to settle down, Angela?" her aunt would ask, patting her arm. "Time is running out, you know. A woman needs a family." Her well-meaning assistant, a young woman half her age, would chatter about school runs and parent-teacher conferences, unknowingly highlighting the vast emptiness in Angela's personal life. At night, she'd scroll through social media, a painful parade of engagement announcements, baby photos, and smiling families. The pressure wasn't just external, it was a deep, internal ache. She began to question her own choices, wondering if she had been waiting for the perfect person, or if she had simply missed her chance entirely, that she was running out of time. Have you ever felt that kind of pressure? That feeling that time is slipping away, pushing you toward a choice you aren't sure about? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. For Angela, that pressure was building, making her vulnerable in a way her business rivals could never manage. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon at a high-end mall, a simple, clumsy moment changed the course of her life forever. She was leaving a store, wrestling with a handful of bags, when a man accidentally bumped into her, sending her silk scarf fluttering to the polished floor. He was immediately apologetic, his smile genuine and disarming. He reached for the scarf, his hand steady, his eyes warm and kind. His name was Liam. He wasn't overtly handsome in the way of the male models she often worked with, but there was a quiet confidence, an earnestness about him that she found captivating. He didn't talk about himself much. Instead, he asked about her, not Angela Hayes, the CEO, but Angela, the woman. He asked about her dreams, her fears, her heart. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Angela felt truly seen. But miles away, in a cramped, dimly lit apartment that smelled of stale cigarettes and cheap coffee, a woman named Chloe was watching her husband's plan unfold. She sat hunched over a laptop, scrolling through Angela's Instagram profile, her expression a cold mixture of contempt and calculation. On a large whiteboard behind her, Angela's name was written at the top, with lines connecting to her company's value, property records, and bank affiliations. Liam was the hunter, and Chloe was the strategist. That night, Angela received a text. "I haven't stopped thinking about you." Lying in her cold, empty bed, she smiled, completely unaware that she had just become the primary target in a game she didn't even know was being played. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Liam courted her with a masterful intensity, a process experts call love bombing. He sent voice notes every morning, just to say he was thinking of her. He sent bouquets of her favorite flower, peonies, to her office. He researched the history of textiles and modern fashion trends, just so he could speak her language, showing an interest no man ever had before. For the first time in years, Angela felt like she mattered, not as a business magnate, but as a woman who was desired and cherished. The hollow echoes in her mansion were replaced with laughter and the sound of his voice. She was so captivated by the feeling of being loved that she willingly ignored the small inconsistencies, his vague answers about his past, his lack of old friends, the way he deftly changed the subject if she asked too many questions. Her closest friend and business partner, Joy, was skeptical. "It's all moving so fast, Angie," she'd warned. "You barely know him." But Angela, defensive and protective of her newfound happiness, brushed off the concerns. Joy was just being cautious. She couldn't understand. She even downloaded a background check app one night but deleted it halfway through, feeling guilty for doubting the one person who made her feel whole. What would you have done in her place? Are these red flags or just the cautious doubts that come with any new romance? 3 months into their perfect romance, Liam sent a text. "I want to see your home. I want to see the world you've built." Angela's heart leaped. She texted back immediately, "Yes, come tonight." She gave him the grand tour of the house she had poured her soul into. They walked across imported marble floors, under crystal chandeliers, past walls adorned with art worth more than most people's homes. He was appropriately impressed, but his eyes were scanning, cataloging, assessing. Angela, blinded by love, saw only a shared future. Finally, she led him into her private study, the nerve center of her empire. And there, built into the wall behind a large oil painting, was the safe. "That's where I keep everything important," she said with a casual smile. "Original company deeds, bearer bonds, my mother's jewelry. I rarely even open it." As she spoke, Liam's gaze locked onto the safe, a flicker of something cold and triumphant in his eyes that was gone as quickly as it appeared. He was the perfect gentleman, nodding with interest, but inside, his mind was racing. Later that night, while Angela slept peacefully in his arms for the first time in her own home, he slipped out of bed, took a photo of the painting and the wall it was on, and texted it to Chloe with a location pin. The reply came back instantly. A single chilling message. "Perfect. Move to phase 2. Angela felt safer than she had in her entire life. She had no idea that the predator was now inside the gates, and he was just getting started. 2 months later, Angela stood in her vast marble bathroom, her hand trembling as she stared at 2 faint pink lines on a pregnancy test. Tears streamed down her face, but for the first time in years, they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. She was pregnant. At 44, she was going to have a child. The dream she thought had long since passed her by was suddenly, miraculously, a reality. This, she thought, would complete her life. It would fill the silent halls with the sounds of a family. That evening, she planned an elaborate surprise dinner. She lit candles, opened a bottle of non-alcoholic champagne, and placed a small, elegantly wrapped box next to his plate. Inside was a watch, the back engraved with the words, "To the future father of my child." When Liam arrived, she could barely contain her excitement. After they sat down, she handed him the gift, her eyes shining with hope. He opened it, read the inscription, and looked up at her. She told him the news, expecting an explosion of joy. Instead, his smile faltered. It was only for a second, a fleeting shadow that crossed his face, but she saw it. He quickly recovered, forcing a wide grin and hugging her, but the warmth wasn't there. His eyes were cold, calculating. The joy in the room curdled into a quiet, unnerving tension. Later that night, he made a call. Angela heard his muffled voice from the garden. It was Chloe. "She's pregnant," he said, his voice flat. "This complicates things." Chloe's reply was devoid of any emotion. "Get rid of it, or get rid of her." 3 days later, while reviewing fabric samples in her office, Angela collapsed in excruciating pain. She lost the baby. In the cold, sterile environment of the hospital, the doctors spoke in hushed clinical tones about stress and unfortunate statistics for her age. But Angela knew, in a place deeper than reason, that it was the heartbreak. It was the icy chill she felt when Liam's smile had vanished. He didn't come to the hospital that day. He sent a text. "So sorry, babe. Stuck in a terrible meeting. Will be there as soon as I can." He never showed. The chair beside her bed remained empty, a silent testament to his absence. Joy rushed to her side, holding her hand and weeping for the loss Angela couldn't seem to process. But Angela herself didn't cry. She just stared at the ceiling, her eyes vacant. A part of her had broken that day, a fundamental piece of her spirit that had dared to hope. She had lost more than a child. She felt as if she had lost herself. The vibrant, powerful woman who built an empire was replaced by a hollow shell. Anyone else would have seen the truth then. They would have seen the cruelty, the emotional abandonment. But Angela didn't leave him. When he finally showed up at the hospital a day later with a bouquet of flowers and a well-rehearsed apology, she let him hold her. She stayed. In her grief and trauma, she clung to the man who had caused it, convinced that his presence was the only thing that could make her feel less alone. Against Joy's frantic pleading, Angela decided the solution was to bind him to her permanently. She told herself that the miscarriage was a tragic accident, that Liam's distance was just his way of grieving, and that a marriage would solidify their commitment. It would fix the cracks that had appeared in their perfect facade. The wedding was a spectacular affair, an event worthy of the Elysian brand. The dress was a couture masterpiece, the flowers were flown in from Holland, and the guest list was a who's who of the fashion and business worlds. Everyone smiled. The cameras flashed. Social media buzzed with congratulations. But as Angela stood at the altar, looking into the eyes of the man she was pledging her life to, she felt nothing. Just a deep, numbing cold, and the faint, desperate hope that this public declaration would somehow make his love real. Liam played his part perfectly, his vows eloquent, his smile broad and convincing. From the back of the crowd, partially hidden behind a floral arrangement, a woman in sunglasses watched the ceremony. It was Chloe, a small, triumphant smirk playing on her lips. That night, after the last of the guests had departed, Angela walked through the now quiet mansion, her heavy wedding gown trailing behind her. As she passed the master dressing room, she heard voices from within, a low murmur. It was Liam's voice, and another, a woman's. She paused, her hand on the door, a knot of ice forming in her stomach. Hidden behind the heavy velvet curtain of a changing stall, still in her magnificent wedding gown, Angela listened as her world fell apart. It was Liam and Chloe, the woman he had introduced earlier as his cousin. They were laughing. "She was so easy," Chloe said, her voice dripping with scorn. Desperate aging women are always the best marks. They're so grateful for the attention. Angela's hand flew to her mouth to stifle a gasp. Then came Liam's voice, cold and clinical. The miscarriage was a gift, made her even more dependent. She gave me the full vault code this morning as a wedding present. Full access. He laughed, a sound that was no longer charming but monstrous. Once the accidental overdose is arranged in a few weeks, I inherit everything as the grieving widower. She's just a name on paper now, a signature on a will. Chloe added, and no one will ever suspect a thing. They'll just see the tragic story of the poor, heartbroken billionaire who couldn't cope. The words hit Angela like physical blows. She was never loved. She was never cherished. She was prey. Her entire relationship, the love she thought she'd found, the child she had lost, it was all a lie, a carefully constructed stage play for an audience of one. She slid silently to the floor, her body shaking with silent, agonizing sobs, the beautiful white dress pooling around her like a shroud. She didn't sleep that night. She lay beside the man who was planning her murder, her breath even, her body still, while a storm of terror and rage churned within her. When he finally left for a business meeting the next morning, a meeting she now knew was with Chloe, Angela moved with a speed and clarity she hadn't felt in months. The broken, hollow woman was gone, replaced by the CEO who had built an empire. She went to the study. She used the code he thought was his key to her fortune and removed the original deeds and bearer bonds, replacing them with expertly forged copies. She hid a tiny, voice-activated recorder behind a row of books on the bookshelf. Then she called Joy. "I heard everything," she whispered into the phone, her voice cracking. "He's going to kill me." Joy arrived within minutes, her face pale with horror. They cried and held each other, and for a moment, Angela felt a flicker of hope. Joy's logic was simple. "We go to the police right now." But Angela shook her head. "It's his word against a hysterical widow's. They'll never believe me without concrete proof." Her plan was to catch him on tape discussing the final details. She would play the part of the happy newlywed, lure him into a false sense of security, and get the evidence she needed to put him and Chloe away forever. But deep down, a cold dread settled in her heart. She knew she was already broken, and broken things don't always win. She had no way of knowing that Liam and Chloe were already 3 steps ahead. In their apartment, Chloe was listening to a live audio feed from a bug they had planted in Angela's phone weeks ago. She had heard the entire panicked call to Joy. She smiled. "She knows," she said to Liam. "Time to accelerate the timeline." That evening, Angela prepared for the most important performance of her life. She played the part of the doting wife, cooking Liam his favorite dinner, smiling and laughing as she recounted her day. Liam and Chloe had decided to join the dinner, with Chloe playing the part of the supportive cousin. Angela's plan was simple: get them talking, get the confession on her hidden recorder. She felt a surge of adrenaline, believing she was finally taking back control. But Chloe had been listening all day. They knew Angela knew, so they changed their own plan. The original idea of a staged overdose was too risky now. This had to end tonight. As Angela's back was turned, Chloe, under the pretense of helping, took the wine bottle and laced the entire contents with a fast-acting, colorless, odorless poison. It was a poison that mimicked a massive heart attack, leaving almost no trace. Angela, thinking she was being clever, had her own plan. She had marked one of the glasses with a tiny scratch, intending to give that one to Liam. When Chloe poured the wine into all 3 glasses, Angela watched her every move, confident in her counter-strategy. They all raised their glasses for a toast. "To new beginnings," Liam said, his eyes locking with Angela's. She smiled back, a flicker of triumph in her eyes, and took a long, confident sip, thinking she was safe. But then, a look of confusion crossed her face. A sharp, burning pain erupted in her chest. She looked at Liam, then at Chloe, who was smiling a cold, placid smile. Angela's glass shattered on the floor. "You thought you were clever, Angela," Chloe said, her voice a soft, cruel whisper. "But we were always smarter." As Angela collapsed, her phone, which she had placed on the dining table, began to vibrate. It was Joy, calling to check on her. The screen lit up with her friend's name, vibrating uselessly next to Angela's motionless hand. The next morning, the grand mansion was eerily silent, the morning light streaming through the massive windows onto a scene of final, quiet tragedy. The police report, when it was finally filed, was brief and conclusive. Angela Hayes, 45, was found deceased by her husband. The official cause of death was ruled as a sudden, massive cardiac event, not uncommon for a woman of her age under immense stress. There were no signs of foul play. At the funeral, Liam played the part of the grieving widower to perfection, his face a mask of sorrow as he accepted condolences. Chloe stood by his side, the ever-supportive cousin, dabbing at her dry eyes with a handkerchief. They inherited everything: the Elysian fashion empire, the mansion, the art, the fortune built on one woman's dreams and sacrifices. The world mourned Angela Hayes, the brilliant icon who had it all but who, in the end, it was said, died of a broken heart. Her empire lives on, but it is now in the hands of the very people who systematically and cruelly destroyed her. Her story has no happy ending. There is no justice. She trusted, she loved, and for that she lost her life. This is what can happen when deep-seated desperation meets calculated deception. Remember her name, remember her story, and ask yourself, how many others are out there, smiling for the cameras, while silently living their own version of Angela's tragic tale? What would you do if you realized the person you loved was your greatest enemy? Is it better to run and lose everything, or to fight and risk losing your life? Angela's gone, but how many more will fall for the same smile? You've seen how love can become a weapon. Don't just watch and walk away. If her story shook you, don't let it end here. Hit subscribe right now so her voice, and stories like hers, never get buried in silence. Because the next victim might still have time, if someone like you decides to care.